Welcome to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke, and today's guest is Reverend Dr. Tracy Cox. She is a doctor of divinity, licensed clergy, spiritual coach, and Reiki master teacher. She's also a near-death experience survivor. In her first episode here on Closer to Venus, we talked about this experience and the impact it had on her life. And today, we'll be talking about using Reiki and energy healing to heal the world. Tracy, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Johnny.
So, Reiki, energy healing, these are things that are not typically associated with members of the clergy. How did that happen?
Well, basically, the way that I came at it is in on an angle. Sometimes divinity comes straight down at you. Sometimes it comes in on an angle. You just got to watch for the way that it enters your life. For me, I was always a very spiritual child, but the kind of spirituality that I followed was more the denomination of spiritualism, and the denomination that I represent here in Canada is the Metaphysical denomination. And so it is, in some countries it's called spiritualism, sometimes metaphysical, but we all, people that follow the denomination, we are all open to all faiths. So we believe that spirituality comes through as individual as a fingerprint. The way it comes through to you is going to be completely different than the way it comes through to me. The way that you feel God, or, we're talking about Reiki today. Reiki, it means universal life force. Once again, that goes around to a yogic training, which is, they call it prana. In Qigong, they call it Qi. It's just the electricity that runs your body, essentially, and goes out into the universe and can be measured. We were talking about some of the science behind it, and I brought this. This is a really great book for any spiritual seeker. It's called Why Woo Woo Works. Have you read this one?
I'm going to have to.
It's so great. And it's by Dr. David Hamilton, PhD. So he's a scientist, and he came into spirituality from the science end of it. And he's got all the scientific reports showing that these things all do work to change people's energy to the positive as opposed to the negative. But you have to, there's rules like anything else. The way that you do these things has to be done in an educated way, but it can change people's lives. Even things like practical prayer that we do in metaphysics or in the spiritualist movement have been scientifically studied and shown that they do work. But it seems to be a hard sell for some people.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is, yeah. And I think we're seeing more of that evidence. So you are a metaphysical minister in the church you practice in. It's not like the typical, say, Catholic church.
No, not at all. The way that Catholicism works, there is a lot of the mysticism within it. We take the mysticism part of, all religions, really. We are inclusive of all faiths, because it all comes down to one truth, and that's that God is one, we are one, everything is oneness. We're all running off that universal life force, that cosmic energy, the electricity that runs your body, whatever you want to call it. We all know that a live body is animated by this electricity, and once someone's passed away, that electricity is not in there any longer. So where does that go? A lot of people will ask, well, what happens? And for me, I like to explain it as, and we were talking about it before, but I feel that it's like the body is the car and the spirit is the driver. And eventually that car is going to be junked. It's just going to be too old, right? It's not going to be able to run on the road any longer. And, as humans, we hope it's close to 100 years old. But we don't know what happens after that. We do know that we go on. And as we were talking about before, being somebody that experienced a near-death experience where I was out of my body spiritually, but still knew who I was. It wasn't like I came out and all of a sudden I was a gaseous ball of light. I was still me, and very aware of what was going on. And I do believe that that's what happens as we cross over to the other side. And I believe eventually you're going to see that your loved ones that are waiting for you, because I have seen people in my family that have passed over. I believe we're in heaven right now, and there's something about our body that causes us to not be able to see the other spirits that are here, whatever is around us, because I think that it would be very confusing. And part of our earth journey is to not know too much about that stuff, right? It's kind of the remembering process of getting back to being spiritual is part of the earth journey.
You had mentioned a couple things. Let's start with the mysticism first, which I think is interesting because you are a metaphysical minister. You're not the typical member of the Catholic Church, and I'm not trying to beat anyone up here, but whenever we talk about anything that deals with energy healing, Reiki, and that type of thing, shamanism will eventually come up because I think shamanism is the root of all that. What I've come to discover is that based on the testimony of various speakers that have been on the show, they seem to think that the mysticism and the shamanistic past of our culture has been suppressed by the Catholic Church for not centuries, millennia. You agree?
I don't think it's just the Catholic Church, and I don't think it's all of the Catholic Church. I think what happens is that you get certain power-hungry individuals in any religion, in any corporation, in any government, in anything that people can get in their hooks into, they will. So I won't call out the Catholic Church because there's a lot of good people too. What I do feel is that there's a lot of people in religion that are trying to be the middleman, and they are trying to extract a fee for you to talk to God. And for me as a clergy in the metaphysical denomination, I want to work with you one-on-one so that you can talk to God, so that you can talk to your angels, and you never need me again, because it's supposed to be a personal relationship with God, or with, if it's Reiki, the universal life force. You don't need a gatekeeper. And I think people that set themselves up as gatekeepers to extract a fee and to control people are wicked. And I think that's what you're talking about. So I think those people are in any religions and any government.
Right. And I was using the church as a simple example that most people can relate to.
Yeah, but I'll throw some more in the mix there and say there's a lot of people like that, period. Yeah. Yeah. And I think we're suffering, a lot of countries, we're suffering under people like that are trying to get extract a fee, however they do it. And, we don't need to get into who or what, but people know what I'm talking about. And I think it's something that needs to be changed. And I think we can change that with everybody pulling together, letting people have their differences, but realizing that we are all children of God. We're all beautiful, and we all have different ways of accessing that divinity. And yours is going to be different than mine. That doesn't mean you're wrong and I'm right. And there's a lot of the fundamentalist religions too that's like, it has to be this way. If not, you're going to hell. And it's like, that's absolutely not true. And it's, once again, it's trying to be a middleman and extract a fee, because what they're trying to do is get more people into their denomination, right?
So before we start talking about Reiki and energy healing a little bit more in depth, what exactly was it about the metaphysical church or the spiritualist church that made you want to take that path as opposed to the typical?
Sure, well, obviously within the Catholic faith, I couldn't even be a minister. So how is that going to help me, right? So right there, yeah, you have to find a denomination that's going to accept you as a woman. What a concept, right? So the Spiritualist church and the Metaphysical church, a lot of the pioneers were women. Like, even if you look at Christian Science, which is basically a mystical Christianity, it was a woman, Mary Baker Eddy, right? Like, there's a lot of women in the background and in the foundation of the Spiritualist church, the Metaphysical church. So I was more drawn to that way. The other thing is, we were talking before I've always had kind of a connection to God, but also the spirit world too. So I could feel spirits, I could see things even as a young child. And then when I was 18, I had that near death experience. And of course, that opened that wide open, blasted it right open. And, that's kind of always been my background. The whole way that I've operated, I've known that there's much more than just what we see here.
I agree. And I think that the near death experience was a pretty impactful experience, to say the least. And it's very hard for us that have never had that experience to try to get our heads around it, because I don't know how many times I've heard of these accounts that I'm trying to figure out what is it like to see colors that don't exist here on Earth and that type of thing.
Yeah, that's what I want to say. That's the thing that really stuck with me is that because I wear glasses and I really do need them. It's pretty blurry otherwise. And the first thing I noticed was that I didn't need my glasses. I didn't have my glasses on and everything was perfect and so sharp. And then the colors were super saturated and not the way you see them normally. There was a depth and there was also like almost a vibration to it. You know what I mean? Like when they talk about colors and fractals and things like that, it was kind of along those lines, very alive. And then almost like you could start to move towards or see through things. It's hard to describe. It's like you could move towards time and space by thinking about it. It's really hard to describe because it was a brief period too, but it was just so huge. But what really stuck with me is that super saturation of the colors. Just nothing like here. Some kind of supernal.
That's what I've been told. And I would imagine this brought you a little bit closer to really understanding the energy and that whole world of Reiki and maybe even seeing it.
Yeah, because there is a certain, like if you tune in and can see auras, and everybody can, I could teach anybody to see auras if I had enough time. There's certain energy fountains in the body, and you know how they talk about chakras, so these different energy centers of the body, but they're energy fountains of the body that turn this energy. And your body, if you see in some of these bioelectric scans that in this book, like these guys would be looking at, is there's a movement to the energy around your body too. It's like a fountain almost. I don't know if you've ever heard of a painter called Alex Gray. He's got it's called the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors, and it's up in Wappinger Falls in New York State. And he has been a painter that's painted this kind of stuff that he's seen. And one of the ways that he started off as a painter was he was painting anatomy for, I believe it was Harvard University, for like medical. But seeing these things and these tests and the energy himself starting to come to the forefront, he does paintings now with these energy fountains and the way that they move. So we're becoming much more aware of the reality of this. So with Reiki, it's been around since the 1800s, but hands-on healing has been around since the dawn of time. Like even the most staid Anglican church has a hands-on healing portion where the minister will come and put their hands on your shoulders. You know what I'm saying? It's all one. It is all the same thing. It's all the same energy. That's that universal life force, which is what Reiki means in Japanese. And it's the same as the Holy Spirit. It's the same as some might call it source energy.
Or shamanism.
Yeah, sure. In the indigenous people here in Canada, they talk about the Creator a lot. They're quite devout. Like they talk about God a lot. I did a sweat lodge up at one of the reserves, and that was a trip. And you do the shamanism there is so powerful it'll just knock your socks right off. In the sweat lodge, there were manifestations of like birds. There were manifestations of a toad came up out of the fire, like that everybody saw.
And you saw this. Everyone saw this.
Yes, everybody saw this. Yeah, it was freaky. Beautiful, so powerful. And so this energy is all around. We work with it every day. This is the energy that makes you stand up and walk into the kitchen and go get a coffee, right? It's all the same energy. It is bioelectric. So that's what we're working with.
And these energies, right, can help us develop psychic abilities, which just about every speaker tells me we all have them. It's just that some people had them a little bit closer to the surface than others. How exactly does that work?
Well, what I feel is that we are all psychic. I feel that gut instincts and intuition, we've all got that. And I have an example of that. A lot of the time, what'll happen is that you go to the grocery store and you go, I should get some cream. And then you're like, oh, no, we got some at home. And you get home and find out that somebody drank it all and that you needed to get it. It's always correct, but you'll second guess it with your conscious, rational mind. So the thing is to almost begin to honor it more. The second that you get that gut instinct, go, I really should do that, just do it. And what I do with my clients in spiritual coaching, one of the things that I do, and I talk about it in that new course that I've got coming out about practical prayer. And it's to write down every time you have that gut instinct or intuition, and write down what you did about it. Did you go against it or did you do it? And you will find, after you keep track of that for a while, that every time you said, okay, I'm going to do it, you were correct. Every time you went, oh, I'm not going to do that, it's like, oh, you're kicking yourself. And it just becomes so apparent that you are actually very psychic and intuitive. You just push it down every day, right? Because it's not logical.
But it's not at the level where anyone could just read someone's energy. I've had loads of people come on and they can basically tell what type of motives they have. If they have motives that are not of our best interests, if they're not, I don't like to use the word evil, but if they're bad people. For instance, I had a girl, she's about, I think 26 or 27. And she was telling me about, among other things, that when she was about 12, there was a contractor that came to their house talking to her mom about doing some work. And she immediately thought, this is not a good guy. And she told her mom about this and she was scolded. Long story made short, her instincts were completely on point and he was trying to scam them or something like that. But I don't think everyone has that ability, do they?
No, I don't think everybody feels it. Just like they were saying scientifically last week, they made a discovery that not everybody has an internal dialogue. They said half the people in the world don't have an internal dialogue going on as they walk around.
They're lucky.
Yeah. And that's the next thing, right? You're not turning things over in your head. But maybe it's connected to something like that. I don't know. For me, it's always been turned on to 11. I've always been on high alert. Like I said, we talked about that conversation about my principal winding up in jail for being evil. And I knew as a kid there was something wrong with him. But I always got that.
That's exactly what I was talking about. I should have brought up your experience because you were right on the money with that. But again, no one believed you at first. They thought you were just some crazy kid.
No, and I got tortured for it. No, he called me in and he called my mom in and said, okay, so why is your daughter always playing with the boys? I was 7 years old. Why wouldn't I play with the boys? We'd play snowballs or whatever. Do you know what I mean? But he just was at me from the time that I was going, why do you always want the boys down there? Like, little did I know. But, the whole thing came out. But I was just, the panic button was going on in my gut, so that I couldn't sit on it. I had to say something. And I think that as people, I've got a friend that's another psychic, and she does a lot of readings, and a lot of her stuff can be heavy, like finding people that have been, disappeared, things like that. And she calls it psychic Tourette's. So it's like as soon as somebody's bad, it's like you're right away. Yeah, she just can't hold it back, right? So people will dislike you if you can't control it, and she can't. She doesn't care either. She'll just go for it. But it's much stronger for some people than others, for sure. I think everybody can train it into themselves, though.
So how did they do that then?
For me, I would teach them Reiki, because the thing with Reiki is that it opens up all those chakras, it balances everything so that you begin to feel the energy. I've had a lot of my students get like spontaneous psychic openings just from getting their Reiki training and attunements, just because it just clears everything out and they can see clearly with it. That's the easiest way I find. And then there's many exercises you can do too. The thing with Reiki is that it's going to protect you as well, because of the fact that you're always doing your self-healing every day. You're balancing all your chakras, or you should be. Anybody that does Reiki should be doing it every day. It just keeps you so that you're very finely tuned, so that you can pick up anything that's weird or, you know, or good too. It's not always bad stuff that we pick up on. It's when things are going well in the direction they should go in.
You had also listed some practical uses for Reiki. Some of them are a little surprising. Buying or selling real estate and job searches.
Oh, geez, yeah, it's powerful for that. One of the things about Reiki is that it is very practical, because once you get to a level 2, you can basically, like, level 1 is just so that you can work on yourself and your family. You're not going to be working on clients, and you're not going to be sending Reiki by distance through time and space. That's for level 2. So that's the difference between 1 and 2. When you learn level 2, you can send Reiki through distance, time, and space. So what I'm all about is always practical use of spiritual gifts. So that's why I wrote this last course about practical prayer. That's why I'm a Reiki master teacher. And this is why I write articles for Reiki Rays and Universal Life magazine, is because I can teach people how to use it from your day, or for your day to day. So let's say you were looking at, you were talking about real estate.
Mm-hmm. Or looking for a job or something practical.
Yeah. So for real estate, there's so many issues that come up along the way. You're dealing with many people, and they have different motivations. You have different motivations as to getting rid of the real estate a lot of the time. A lot of the time it's something sad, like you've lost your job, or it's too much money, or somebody's died. So when you send Reiki to it, you kind of clear up all of that energy so that it's not so, it's hard to describe, muddy. It's like you're dragging through it. It's not happening. Nobody's coming. So when I work on somebody's real estate, like a client will ask me, can you help me with this situation? So what I do is I send the Reiki to the entire situation. So I send the Reiki to the client, to the piece of real estate, and to, the agents and everything that's surrounding it, so that it can just blast through there and be a force for good, a force for positivity, get rid of all the negative energy that's attached to it, essentially. And you can do that with Reiki.
In that case, does that foster a most beneficial outcome for all involved, or?
Yeah, so the way that you end Reiki is always for the highest good of all concerned. Always. And that's the thing to remember with energy healing, is that to work, it's a thy will be done kind of thing. It's essentially leaving it to the Reiki to flood the area with the energy for the highest good of all concerned. We don't know what that's going to look like. We don't know who the person is that's going to come and buy that real estate. We don't know what the price is. We just know that it's for the highest good of all concerned. That way you're sending the energy out so that it's clean. Do you know what I mean? If you're trying to do something through force of will, maybe you're trying to get too much money out of somebody. Maybe this, maybe that. What we're trying to do with the Reiki is make it perfect and fair for everybody, right? And smooth. Smooth is the way. Peace and happiness is the way, right? That's how we want to live.
Hopefully, yes. So
yeah. There's a few weirdos around, but they don't concern us.
So in other words, there are practical uses for Reiki and energy healing. You can use it for just about anything that you're trying to accomplish. But as you mentioned, it helps if you're thinking about what's the greatest good for all involved.
Yeah, you think that with everything. Like even with doing healing on your body, you think for the highest good of all concerned, so that you're not messing with anybody's karma. It's always clean. The energy is always clean. That's the whole point about Reiki, is that you're kept protected and you're protecting everybody else too.
Okay. If we all do that, that can actually create a lot of good for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that I do with my Reiki students, and I've written a lot of articles about this too, is the fact that if we just send good energy, and I mean, if you know Reiki, you could send Reiki. If you pray, you can send prayers. If you, there's a million different energy healing techniques, a million different ways of sending positive energy. They all work. And that's to just send it to every single human being on earth. I'm talking everybody, 100% of everybody. Because the problem with the world today is that everybody's sorted out one way or another way. You're this, or you're that, or you're, we just want to get along now. People that are in Reiki, we're sick of all this fighting. We just want peace. I don't understand how people that have so much in the ball in the world are so stupid in other ways. They're just wasting time and they're ruining people's lives by being negative, by fighting, by dividing. We at this point in humanity's evolution, it shouldn't even be allowed for there to be war. We should be everything by diplomacy. Just no more of that. It's ridiculous. Like that. It's funny because we watch Star Trek a lot. My family and I, like we're Trekkies, right? And they're always talking about that, how they're trying to make it so there's peace with everybody, and it's just so hard. Like eventually they got it on Earth in Star Trek, but now they have to worry about the galaxy, right? And there's a whole bunch of negative people out there.
Out in the galaxy.
Yeah, out in the galaxy.
You're talking about star beings,
the Borg,
things like that. Yeah. Well, that's probably a whole nother discussion. But
yeah, for sure.
Since you brought it up, have you had any contact with, let's say, non-human beings?
My son and I have seen a UFO once, and it actually was recorded as a well-known UFO sighting here in our area. And we're in King, Ontario, which is kind of just north of Toronto. We're kind of in the country, just a little bit outside of town. And I think my son was it might have been about 12 years ago or 13 years ago. And he called me to look out his bedroom window. And we could look and see down the valley. And there was these 5 amber lights in the sky, and they would move in like, it's hard to describe. Never seen anything like that before. It moved in a very strange way, and they would do formations, then fall out, and then regroup, formations, do something, and then fall out. And everybody was calling the cops, like, what's going on? And, it was well-known phenomenon within the area, and it went on a long time too. And, I believed in aliens before that, of course, but, seeing that, I was like, okay, now I really believe. And now, we see that it's all coming out.
I don't know about all of it, but
I don't know. I don't believe anything anyone says anymore.
Right. Believe half of what you see and nothing of what you hear. But in terms of reading energy, because you're obviously a bit more sensitive than the average person, have you ever been able to sense energy that you think might not be of this earth? Just
in that time. I mean, when you see things that, like, I have seen angels a couple times, and they're of this earth because they are, when we say that the universal life force is the same thing as the source, is the same thing as the Holy Spirit, it's like, it is everywhere. It is what runs the show. So, if people think that heaven is something out there, no, we're standing in heaven right now. It's just something about this meat bag that we drive around makes it so we can't see. And I think we probably would lose our minds. If we saw into the spirit world the whole time, I think we might lose our minds. So this way, at least we can keep it together.
That brings up a very good point. All that is right here. Heaven is not up in the sky someplace. We're sitting in it, but are we on a different frequency where we're not able to see it? Whereas mediums, clairvoyants, and that lot are able to tune into it.
Once again, I think everybody can. If you train yourself, it just takes time. It's so close to us. Everybody dreams. And I do believe that a lot of the time when dreams come through to you, you are experiencing the spirit world. It's just you don't know it. It's because you're in the spirit world. Like your spirit is in the spirit world. It's still functioning within the spirit world. It's just functioning here too. It's covered in a meat bag. It's driving a meat bag around. That's no better way to put it. There's something about this body that stops us from seeing everything.
I'm not going to be able to get that description out of my head for a while. Meat bag. Good Lord.
Yeah. Well, that's from Futurama. That's what Bender calls us.
Okay. Very interesting. But I think it's also very interesting that you believe that heaven and the spirit world is all around us. It's not in a separate location.
No, it's here right now. Yeah. Yeah, we're in it.
Since Reiki and energy healing can be used for practical things, you also believe it can be used to heal the world, raise our vibration, which everyone is talking about.
Everyone. And the thing to remember is that with the Reiki energy, if we were all sending Reiki to every single person on earth, it's the same thing as thinking about if we all lived with love thy neighbor. And every single person only was loving and helpful to the people around them and never hurt them, never took away from them, never did anything but build them up. If every single person on earth lived like that, we would change the energy in the world like that. It would immediately be a paradise because you've subdued the evil inclination. The Kabbalists call it the evil inclination. It's something that we're always fighting here on earth. It's just part of the struggle. And they believe that us fighting that struggle is what releases the light. And where this fountain of energy comes from is that it's that duality, that good against evil kind of thing.
The duality, you're reading my mind again because I was just about to bring that up. So just to kind of circle back to the religion issue, different denominations and cultures, there are a lot of really important things. Like what you just mentioned about the Kabbalists is really important. I think a lot of that, my instinct is telling me that that's grounded in something that's very true. But at the same time, a lot of these works, a lot of these documents have things that are altered or kind of, they've been infected by ulterior motives and agendas and things like that.
Sure, watered down for consumption, whatever it is.
Creates a lot of confusion.
Yep, it does. It does. And that's what I was talking about before, how wrong I think it is for people to insert themselves as the middleman, right? You can only talk to God through me. That's just wrong. Anybody can talk to God the second that they decide to talk to God. It's just what I do is teach people to pray and or do Reiki. They can do it, if they're more secular. Like I said, everybody's spirituality is as individual as a fingerprint. And we all have different ways of accessing God. For some people, it's listening to the Beatles, right?
Or Duran Duran or Depeche Mode.
Yeah, whatever it is. And there's no judging and there's nothing wrong with that. My whole point is that I just want people to talk to God, because if we all talked to God and said, God, help us out here, please show me what to do. And that's the biggest thing to remember, is that anything goes wrong, please God, help me, show me what you want me to do. Just ask, and you will see, but you have to ask first instead of just freaking out, right?
Yeah. Speaking of asking, this is a difficult question. What or who is God? Everyone wants to know that. What is it? Who is it?
Well, like I said, I think that God comes through everybody in a different way. I think that we all access God differently. So to me, it's a big sky daddy with long, flowing white hair and a beard. That's my big daddy, that I talk to all the time. For somebody else, maybe it's a beautiful sunset, and that they go every day and they give thanks. And it could, do you know what I'm saying? It's always going to be something that's positive. It's always going to be something that's loving. It's always going to be something that's helpful. It's always going to be something that's building you up and not tearing you down. The way that you see the evil is that it does the exact opposite, right? Scares people, tears them down, makes them fearful, makes them think they're less than. Those are all evil. Those are all the opponent. Those are all the negativity. So anything that you do that moves towards the positivity, that's going to be an expression of God. So it's different for everybody. I think that's the problem, is that people try to
define it as one definition.
Yeah, but it's all in that energy field. It's all in that Universal life force, yeah.
Okay. So might that explain all the near-death experiences where some people see Christ, some people see Buddha, some people see their grandmother, or whatever their culture has taught them to believe in or to worship?
Yeah, and I also think it's whatever their spirit really connects with too, right? Like I think it's an automatic thing. It's not necessarily learned. Maybe they were just going back and remembering in this life. In the Kabbalah, there's a story that when you're born, your guardian angel talks to you before they send you down and tells you everything you're going to do and that you signed up for this. He's going to be there to watch over you, but it's going to be rough. Get ready. But you signed up for this. And the last thing that they do is they strike a blow here. And that's where you have those two lines. That's your guardian angel hits you like that and you forget everything. And then you go down and you're born. And living as a human is that slow remembrance of all those things. But you come into this life forgetting that. And I think that's the hard part.
But do you think coming into this life, part of the task is remembering who we are, remembering our divinity?
I think so, yeah.
As you mentioned, we are spiritual beings having a human experience, not the other thing around.
That's right. I think that's part of the spiritual journey of a human being. Not everybody gets there, of course. Unfortunately, what I see, and I think it's sad, is that a lot of people, they won't believe in Reiki or they won't believe in prayer or none of this, right? They want to get everybody to their side where everything sucks, nothing works, it's all terrible, right? Real rays of sunshine like that. But there's a lot of people like that. And it's really hard because it makes me sad for them that they're not more open. They're acting like a jilted boyfriend or girlfriend. You know how there's like a jilted boyfriend or girlfriend and they just act like a juvenile and everything's terrible and everybody sucks and it's just such a low level vibration. Do you know what I mean? And if they kind of got out of that ego thing, going, well, I didn't get what I want. It's like spirituality is not getting what you want. It's creating your energy field so that you are positive enough to get the life that you want, the life that you deserve. Merit is a thing. The way that you act is a thing. Somebody that's going to have the merit of being a person that's loyal and of their word, they're going to do better in this life. And it's not from any spiritual, nothing religious, because people know they can trust them and do business with them and not get screwed, right? So it's logical, but people don't quite understand. I think a lot of people get a chip on their shoulder when bad things happen. I think that bad things happen to everybody. It's how you deal with them.
Before I forget, I wanted to go back to what you mentioned about the Kabbalah, where the story is the guardian angel tells us before we come down to earth what we're supposed to be doing here. Then they do whatever they do and they touch us and then we forget, right? What you described sounds very similar to what's known as a life between life space, where in between incarnations.
Absolutely. Yeah, where you just kind of hang around and watch what's going on. You're in the spirit world, but I think that a lot of the time they're watching what's going on in the material world. They probably have other people in their circle of souls that they hang around. Maybe that's they can be a guide for somebody else. Like, we don't know. There's layers upon layers of this stuff. And I think until we're in the spirit world, we won't know. I think it's part of this thing, this not knowing that it constructs the pillar of faith. And the pillar of faith is part of what you need to manifest in the material world. It's just part of what you need. It's hard. It's one of the hardest things to do, but it's huge.
Speaking of faith, and not to be confused with the faith that many of us are taught to believe in a fearful God and, all of that fundamentalist crap.
You're a horrible sinner and...
Yeah, terrible.
Very negative.
It actually really is, because as you just mentioned, fear is one of the lowest vibrations.
Yes, that's the thing.
They were talking about raising our vibration. That's actually going in the wrong direction, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing. That's why there's been so much fear fed to us in the media, and we don't have to talk whatever, right? We all know it. So much fear fed to us that it makes us weak, And then they run roughshod over us. And then everybody sits around and goes, what happened? And it's like, well, you didn't participate in your community because you were fearful and didn't speak up, and there's a lot of that going on right now, a lot of things like that. And I think that fear causes people to be paralyzed and not live their lives. And I think it's sad.
So other than everyone sending rays of love and Reiki and energy to all human beings, it's a tall order. What else do we need to know on a practical level that even the most skeptical person can say, okay, I'll try this. I can do this once every day for a minute?
That's a very good question, because all these things take a little bit of determination, a little bit of education. Yes, for sure. I think that the easiest thing is to love thy neighbor. Use the golden rule. Okay, let's go secular. The golden rule. Treat everybody as you would like to be treated. Can you imagine if everybody in the world treated everybody as they'd like to be treated?
I'll agree with that.
Right there. So if everybody just started with that, that would be a quantum shift, right? I don't think there's many people that want to be treated badly, unless they're a total weirdo. We don't need to get into that. But I think that it really boils down to the golden rule, which I know sounds ridiculous, but that's pretty concrete thing to do. You don't have to be part of any religion. You don't have to be learning Reiki or energy healing. It's a really important thing to remember that we've spent the last 3 years with a lot of governments, celebrities, whatever, trying to influence us one way or another, a lot of pressure put on us. And I don't think a lot of people have been kind of stepping back and thinking and grounding within themselves. What do I believe? What is going on here? Because people are confused and there's no real way to turn. A lot of it is just to get yourself centered so that you're operating in a way that's not out of panic. So once again, Reiki is great for that. There's also an exercise that I teach my clients, and it's just the power of 3 deep breaths. And what that is that anytime you feel yourself getting stressed, is that you take 3 deep breaths, and when you take them in through your nose, you can think about the white light of healing. Think about your entire body filling up with white light and healing. Like think about yourself hollow, and that through your nose, that beautiful white light of healing filling up your body. And then as you exhale through your mouth, thinking about any fears, stress leaving your body like a shadow out. So the same thing in. Yeah. So in white light, exhale, negativity and shadow 3 times. And they've actually studied caregivers that look after people that have got Alzheimer's and dementia, and that is a very demanding job and difficult. And caregivers that do the 3 deep breaths, after a few days of doing it, even though they've got incredibly stressful days, they're finding that their blood pressure is normalizing, their stress hormones are normalizing, like all the beautiful things that you want. And then they're able to deal with their clients who are people that have got dementia. It can be very difficult and scary too. There's more of a connection. They're seeing them in a more sympathetic way because of the fact that they've just done this 3 deep breath exercise. So to be honest, that's the first thing that I would tell people to do. Just every time you get stressed out, take a beat, do 3 deep breaths, see how you feel.
I like the white light and the 3 deep breaths and just about everything else. Tracy, thanks so much for joining us today. Very good information. I really like that as practical advice for our listeners. Speaking of which, how can our listeners find you online?
They can come to my website, reverenddratracycox.com. Love to see you.
Excellent. I will put that in the notes and the transcript as well. You've been listening to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing. In the meantime, for more info, go to closertovenus.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.